My name is Mike Hickerson. I'm honored to be the lead pastor of Mission Church. I love everything that God is doing in and through the people that make up Mission, whether you're hanging out on the patio or in the lobby or online or in the room. Man, we exist as a church to help people find and follow Jesus. That's what we're going after. So grateful for the imperfect people that are a part of this team, the imperfect people that are in this room and online and in the patio. All of us are imperfect. We've all gone our own way away from God, but that's the good news of who God is. In fact, it's helpful to just maybe even type in the chat or even say to the person next to you, we do this a lot. So if you're new to Mission, welcome. This will get normal in a second. You just want to look to the people you came with and just say, hey, you're not perfect. And go ahead. And it's going to start a fight because they're going to look back at you and be like, well, you're not perfect either. You know, that's not always the best to do relationally when you're in a fight, but it's really great to do as a church. Because the church is the people. Building's cool, building's a tool, but the people has always been the church, and the church is made up of imperfect people. But we're made up of imperfect people that have been rescued by a really, really good God, a perfect God actually, who sent his perfect son into the mess to take the place of our imperfection and rebellion. And that means when God looks at us, those of us that have accepted his son, he only sees the perfection of his son. That is great news for us imperfect people. It means that there is hope for every single one of us. Not just people that are hustling their way, but God moved towards us at your worst. On your worst day, God sent his best for you because he knew that you could not pay the price on your own. And he desired relationship with us. And that means there's hope for every single one of us. And I know you're probably going, not me, not me. No, absolutely you. Absolutely. God rescues and transforms lives. And that doesn't just give us the get out of hell free card, which is cool, that's great. But he also lets us be transformed into the best versions of ourselves, the us that he created us to be. He gives us the power not only to be rescued sons and daughters, but to be transformed into the best version. Man, it is such a good day when we surrender that power that God transforms us and keeps working on us. And we're in this series. It's like one of my favorite series. It's the questions that Jesus asked, because anytime Jesus asks a question or God asks a question, it's not because he needs to know the information. We talk about that a lot. It's because we need to get it into our thick skulls, or I need to get into my thick skulls. So last week, Jody kicked us off with how many fish do you have? Like what's in your hand a little bit? Like what are you bringing? I know you don't think it's much, but what are you bringing? God's going, I'm not worried about necessarily what you got in your hand. I'm worried about this if you're willing to open up your hand and let me have it. Because when you let me have what's in your hand, it's going to go do immeasurably more than you could ask or imagine. Today we're going to walk through maybe my favorite question in the Bible. One of my favorite narratives of Jesus walking and the way he engaged in history is, do you want to get well? It's one of my favorite questions. And then, why are you so afraid? And do you love me? And then we're going to talk about why you pay attention to sawdust in somebody else's eye and planks in your own eye. It's a good question. And then, what good is it to gain the whole world yet lose your soul? Is a good question. Like you can succeed at all the right things, but lose your soul along the way. Jesus says, what good is that? So just to get us started, I think there's this disease that's out there, and I do it all the time when somebody asks you because you don't think anybody really wants to know anything about you, and that's probably me, so I'm just going to stay real still, which is highly impossible. So, but it's like when somebody asks you and you don't think they really want to know anything about you, you just want to kind of get out of the conversation. You're like, how you doing, man? I'm fine. No, you're fine. No, I'm fine. I'm totally fine. We call this disease the hypochondriac. It's the person who knows they're sick or knows that it's not going great, but they keep saying that I'm fine. And it's like, well, no, your world's falling apart, dude. Like your marriage is on the rocks or ending or done. Like you're not fine. Or like you just got laid off from your job, or like you all are struggling emotionally. You got some addiction stuff going on. There's some struggles you got going on in your family of origin. You can't just say I'm fine to everything, right? No, I'm fine. I'm hypochondriac. They know they're sick, but they just keep saying I'm fine. But maybe it's image management because we want to put forth the perfect version, Instagram worthy of ourselves, influencers in the wild of ourselves, Maybe it's pride that we can't never let them see a sweat, or never act like your weakness, or never act like you need anything, never act like you're not fine, because then you're not fine. Or maybe it's fear. Maybe we fear like if we admit that we aren't fine, then maybe we fear change more than the mess that we're living in currently. We're going to walk through a question. Again, it's probably one of my favorite life messages for myself that I think Jesus constantly asks me on a consistent basis. It reaches through the thousands of years of history from God's word, from the Bible, and into my heart, present day. And I think it'll do that with us. So it starts in John 5, verse 2. We'll check it out. If you have a Bible, you can open it up or hang in John 5. If not, it's on the screen. If you can click the app or anything like that, the Bible's right there. So sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for a feast of the Jews. So Jewish people and the history of the Christian faith, there's just parties everywhere. So there's lots of feasts, lots of parties. They like to celebrate. So that's why we love to throw great parties as a church, just so you know, we're in good company. So there we go, verse 3. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate, which is probably, I can imagine what would mainly go through the sheep gate. Genius. Okay, great job. There's a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda. Ever seen a Bethesda hospital? Like the place where people get well? Anybody know any of those? That's where this comes from. And which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. So this is a real place in real time, in real history, on a real day. Verse 4. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been invalid for 38 years. 38 years. So there was this myth out there that every now and then this pool would like stir up and the first person in the water would like get healed. And so there was like all these people that go like hang out by the pool because they thought that they could get healed. And so you got all these people, as people were coming through the sheep gate, there's all these people that are broken, messy. And in this culture, you were usually ostracized from your family. It was a huge burden on the family. They didn't know how to take care of you. They didn't have access to great medicine. They didn't have access to technology. It was one of those things that normally if a baby was born with some kind of deformity, they would just leave it alone. But here, we've got this guy that's been, we don't know who dropped him off. We don't know how he gets there for 38 years. He's been an invalid. And it's great English, but he felt invalid because he didn't measure up to anybody else. He wasn't like everybody else. He was on the outside of everyone else. Something happened to him in his life or his past, and we don't know what it is. We never find out what it is. There's probably some physical wounds for sure. There's some emotional wounds. There's some family wounds. They probably just left him on the side there. This isn't a short-term thing. This guy has been this way for 38 years. Most men didn't live past 50 at this time. I mean, it happened a long time ago, and it's dominated his life and his present, and it's defined most of his life. I don't want to get too intrusive yet. Well, you been there? I mean, maybe not invalid. Maybe you are. But you maybe have felt invalid because of the thing that's dominated and defined most of our life for 38 years. And he had this plan of how he could get better on his own. He had it all worked out of how he could get better on his own. Been there? Yeah, I got issues, bro. I'm good. I got a plan. I'm going to get better on my own. I'm going to white knuckle this sucker and wrestle it to the ground, and I'll be able to get better on my. Yes, it's defined and dominated my life for 38 years, but I got this, man. I got a hold of it. I got the plan of how I'm going to change my life. Verse 6, here's our question of the day, big money question. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" Just hang right there for a second. Someday Jesus is going to get mad at me in heaven, but I think this is a stupid question. I mean, I look at this, I'm like, stupid question, Jesus. Who in their right mind has been an invalid for 38 years or invalid for 38 years and needs to be asked if they want to get well? He's by the pool where he's trying to get well. Do you want to get well? Dumb question, Jesus. Sorry. But then I realize, remember, when Jesus is asking questions, it's not because he needs the info. It's because I do. Or he does. Maybe you do. Do you want to get well? Yeah, maybe you've been rescued by him. But do you want to get well? Because there's a difference between being rescued and being well. Do you want to get well? I mean, I don't know, man. The more I hang out with people, the more I understand my own brokenness and the depths of which God has had to rescue me from and continues to transform me, to realize that this is a great money question every day of my life. Do I want to get well? So what keeps us from getting well? I don't know your story. I wouldn't pretend to know every bit, but is there any anxiety or worry or panic or anger or bitterness or abuse or alcohol or drugs or pornography or sexual addiction or racism or cynicism or lying or grief or divorce or criticism or perfectionism or procrastination or codependency or self-righteousness? And I keep talking fast because there's a lot of stuff out there that maybe keep us from getting well. You control freak, workaholic? Do you overspend, overeat, undereat, relationship wounds that have left you with trust issues? Do you ever know something is wrong and do it anyway? Just me? Okay, that's fine. Do you find it hard sometimes to fall asleep because your mind is racing, playing the videotape of all the regrets of your life? Do you ever find it hard to get out of bed? Do you struggle with depression? Do you battle envy, contentment, or insecurity? You got a memory that haunts you? Got any unresolved guilt that paralyzes you? If you answered yes to any of these things, I would say welcome to the human race, and I would ask you, just like Jesus is asking all of us, do you want to get well? Not just saved. Do you want to get well? Because we all need to get well in some way. The longer I live, the more I realize that we all got stuff that keeps us from God. And luckily, God moved towards us in our mess to obliterate the obstacles, to pay for the obstacles that keep us from him. So we all have a was. We all got a was. We all got stuff back there. My was is the only was that I got. You got was, it's the only was you got. But sometimes what will happen back in our was defines and dominates our is, our present. But we can't let happen in our was because we can't do anything about our was. Only God can do stuff about our was. You can't always remove the consequences of our was, but he can remove the penalty and the obstacle of relationship with him in our was. But we let what happened in our was, and some of our was last night. We let what happened in our was, because it's back there, impact our is. Because we all got an is. We all got a present. We all got a direction we're walking. We all got a thing that God wants to do in and through us in this moment. We all got a thing that he wants to ask us, do you want to get well from? We all got stuff. Whether we let what happened in our was dominate our is, and then what I'm learning, and you know this, but we all have an is to come. We all have a way that we're walking. There's a future for us. No matter how messy and jacked up your was is, there is an is to come that can be completely different if we will let God let us get well in our is. This is really hard to keep saying was, is, and is to come, but I want you to realize that the was is only was you got, and it's going to jack, and when we live with the dominated was, it messes up our is, and if our is messed up, then our is to come has no hope. But if we will let God be the God of all of it, our was, our is, and our is to come, there's nothing that God can't do to transform a human life. That's the promise that we hold to. That means there is hope for every single one of us. But what happens is we get caught in this spin cycle living, where we try harder. We got this thing where we're gonna just try real hard. We're gonna white knuckle it, and then we you know what? I'm never gonna do that again. I hate this thing and what it's done to my family, and I hate all this stuff, and I hate who I am when I'm navigating this, and I hate that. Whatever. There's all kinds of stuff. Whatever that list that I read that is your thing that kind of keeps you from being broken. We try harder because we don't want to be that person anymore. And then what do? White knuckle it and fail. We're like, oh. I'm terrible. I'm always going to be this way. It's never going to be able to change. And so then immediately we feel this overpowering sense of guilt, where we feel guilt about the things that we've done. We've tried harder and we fail, and then we feel guilty and we don't know what to do with it, so let's just numb it some more. Let's get away from it, or let's push it away, or let's sweep it under the rug and not let anybody know about it. And all of a sudden that guilt morphs into its sinister cousin called shame, where we feel guilty about what we've done, but eventually in this spin cycle, we feel shame about who we are. And it morphs into that. So then when we feel shame about who we are, it goes way back from the first rebellion against God. We start hiding. We start putting stuff away. We start not letting anybody know the real us. We start trying to get in this spin cycle where no one, if they knew, then they wouldn't love me. If God knew, we know that he knows everything, but we're just going to play a game of hide and seek with the creator of the universe and hide from him. And then we make promises. Because we don't want to be that. We don't want to feel the shame. We don't want to feel like we're hiding, so we make promises, and then we try harder, and we fail, and we have guilt, and we have shame, and we hide, and we promise, and we try harder, and we get into this spin cycle where we let this thing, what's happened in us, dominate us, and we think that we're invalid, whatever it is, that we're invalid because we're a loser, we're a drunk, we're an addict, we're a junkie, we're a pervert, we're stupid, we're ugly, we're unloved, we're unwanted, we're alone, we're damaged. It's always been this way. I can't get out of this spin cycle living. We feel guilt because what I've done. We feel shame because who we are. But I'm just here to tell you that this spin cycle has no hope in it. But man, there's something that has massive amounts of hope, and it is the power of the grace of God in your life and in my life. Shame tells us that I'm defective, but grace tells me that I'm valuable. Shame would say that the greatest fear of shame is the weapon of judgment, but God's grace is even greater weapon is that of unfailing love. Shame says that because I'm flawed, I'm unacceptable. Grace says that even though I'm flawed, God's grace says that I am priceless. Shame says that the opinion of others is what matters most, but the grace of God says that the opinion of God is the only thing that matters. Shame says that I must be perfect to earn the approval of others. Grace claims that I am accepted even at my worst day, and regardless of my imperfections. Shame makes us hide, and God's grace sets us free. What I'm learning, maybe you know this already, is that self-deception for self-reliance equals self-destruction. And you keep spin cycle and trying harder. Do you want to get well? Do you even believe that it's possible? Because some of the step of believing that it's possible, wanting to get well, is believing that God could and would want to if he were able and saw it. Like, let me show what I mean. Most of our temptations most of our rebellion against God doesn't even make sense. Let me just give you one, for example. Like lying. Your parents taught you not to lie. You'll teach your kids not to lie. You don't want to work for someone that lies. You don't want to date someone that lies. You want someone working for you that lies. You don't want a government that lies. I'll just leave that there. You don't want a policeman that lies. You don't want a coach that lies. You don't want a friend that lies. You don't want a lawyer that lies. You don't want to date a liar. You don't want to be a roommate that lies. You are against lying in every single way. Like, it is not anything that you'd want to do. And then in some certain circumstances, and maybe it's a problem with you that'll happen this afternoon, what do? You lie. Fear, image management, pride, whatever it may be that triggers it, that rebellion against God. Those of us with an addictive behavior could write a book on it, on that thing. Like, you hate it, but you go back to it. You hate what it's done to your family. You hate what it's done to your reputation. And we all got an it, by the way. You hate what it's done to you financially. You hate everything about it. But it just draws you right back in all the time. Do you want to get well? How bad does it have to get before you admit that you need help? And Jesus is going, I'm asking you the question because you need to know the information, Mike. I have the power. Do you want to get well? Because we won't change until the pain becomes greater than the fear of change. Most of us take the path of least resistance. Jesus is going, do you want to get well? If we don't really want to get well, we will lack the power to change. And I love this from Bill W. He said, we found that God could and would if he were sought. Could and would, can and wants to, and will if he were sought. Let's go back to the text, John 5, verse 7. Do you want to get well? Is what Jesus just asked. Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down and gets in ahead of me. Jesus asked this dude, do you want to get well? You've been this way for 38 years. Do you want something better from this? And all he could come up with is, no one will help me. It's not my fault. Other people get in the way. This is not the question that Jesus asked, and he's answering the wrong question. He didn't ask, how did you get here and why aren't you well yet? Jesus asked, do you want to get well? Jesus isn't asking us, why are you here? Whose fault is it? How did you get here? Do you have your own plan to get well? He's not asking any of us that. He's only asking, do you want to get well? Didn't ask why or how or what your plan is. Do you want to get well? Jesus not asking about your plan to make yourself better. Jesus not asking whose fault is it that you're on this mat by this pool. Jesus not asking, did you deserve to be hurt? Do you deserve to be hurt or angry or bitter? Because I promise you, if I heard your story, you probably do deserve to be hurt or angry or bitter. But Jesus is not asking any of that stuff about why you're here or how you're here or what your plan is to make yourself better. He's saying to me and you throughout the pages of history, do you want to get well? Verse 8, then Jesus said to him, get up, take up your mat, and walk. And at once the man was cured, and he picked up his mat and walked. I mean, I freak out all the time. I love the Bible. I love this stuff. This is so cool. But then I'm like, why did he need his mat? Jesus, he's like mat guy for 38 years. He don't need his mat no more. Like, he's good with the mat. That mat has got plenty of use. He doesn't need the mat. That's what's dominated and defined his life, his whole life. He doesn't need the mat anymore. He's the guy that used to be Matt guy. His name's probably not Matt, but we'll just call him Matt. So he's like Matt that was on the mat. Matt guy doesn't need the mat anymore. Matt guy is going to be walking around town now. And everyone knows Matt guy in town. from his past and his story. Been there? What I'm learning is helpful for me, and actually Jody showed this to me a couple years ago, so it's all her fault, is that his Matt is a story of who he was, that God changed his is, and has him on a different is to come path. And so his Matt is the story of how God has transformed his life. So you can take your Matt because it has no power over him anymore. It's just who he was. So I think there's some things that if we want to get well, I'm just going to sprint through these real fast. These are practical things. Is that if we want to get well, we got to believe Jesus can make you well. And I know that's a journey for a lot of us. Yeah, oh man. I believe in Jesus. I believe in God. The Bible's sometimes hard for me. I'm like, I want to, but I don't know. You got to believe that Jesus wants to make you well. That's part of the faith journey. You got to believe that he can make you well, and you got to believe that Jesus wants to make you well, that he's not angry at all your was stuff. He's not angry at all your rebellion. He actually transforms and saves. Third, you got to stop blaming. Well, I would get well, but they won't put me in the water. I would get well, but this won't. It's impossible to blame your way to freedom. Impossible. You got to stop blaming. Jesus isn't asking you how you got here, whose fault is it that you're here. He's saying, do you want to get well? Fourth, I'd say, we got to accept and obey Jesus. Fifth, realize that we all have a story to tell. You want to get well? You got a story to tell. So in light of that, we all have a story to tell, I want to spend the last few moments, I want to invite my friend Alia up here to the stage to just help maybe walk through some of her story and how it can be an encouragement to us in this whole journey of how Jesus makes people well. Will you help welcome Alia to the stage? What's up? Hey. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to slide this over, so do that. All right, so we've been friends.
Long time.
Probably 7, 8 years?
7 or 8 years, yeah.
Yeah, you like Jody better than me.
I do, and your kids.
Yeah, very well. You're in good company. So yeah, first of all, thanks for being up here and just being willing to kind of walk through your journey and story. So 7, 8 years, you show up at Mission. How did you end up at Mission?
Yeah, so I came to Mission, I think it was Easter 2013, 2014. A friend of mine brought me, somebody that was really important to me that I actually kind of was indebted to at the time. And he brought me to this Easter service, pretty much against my will. I was in just a really messy situation in my life.
Not forcibly.
No, a little bit forcibly. Kind of dragged me in here kicking and screaming, but promising this isn't what you've experienced before, and just come check out this one time. And so I came, and I spent pretty much the entire service just bawling my eyes out, just crying in the back, and my friend sitting there, arms crossed, laughing, knowing that was going to happen. And I quickly realized, Mission was a place where I could feel broken and that it was safe. And I had never experienced that before. Feeling broken had always been, something that invited being vulnerable to attack, honestly, in some way or another. So started coming to Mission and was hooked on the place and the people, and not on the idea of Christ and who Jesus was, but on the safety that I felt and the acceptance and the love that I experienced when I walked in.
Yeah, so attend Mission, and then life just gets better up and to the right immediately because it's so amazing, and it just was so easy. It happened just like that for you.
Right, that's it. Completely healed, all the way better. I'll just leave now. No, absolutely not. So I kept coming around to Mission for about 4 years after that, just messing up my life, continuing to just live in this cycle of I was watching that cycle and going who followed me around and wrote down this pattern that I was in, right? And I just got to this point. I came to a stress point in my life where I realized that in that cycle, I was losing who I was by trying to fix how I was. Those things that I was chasing after, for me, was money, prestige, desirability, to just make me feel like I was worth something, to change the way that I was feeling. I didn't really have a sense of self-worth or self-value. And so I was turning to all of these things that my life experience had told me were going to fill that hole, right? And that lots of people talk about that God-shaped hole, and that's definitely what I was trying to do. And I got to this point where I'd pretty much lost myself. And the turnaround time in that circle had gotten smaller and smaller. The shame, the cycle, the pain, the failure, all of that had just become like, it was instantaneous almost. Like when I would turn to the things that I was trying to use to make myself feel better, there wasn't that period of like, okay, this is working anymore. And so at some point, I just had to get off the merry-go-round.
Yeah, so I'm not necessarily the circumstance, but so what is getting off the merry-go-round? Like, so Jesus is going, okay, I'm inviting you to get well. You're starting to fall in love with him.
Right.
Starting to have a relationship with him. And he's going like, all right, do you want to get well?
Yeah.
Like, what steps, where did you go from there? Like,
Yeah, so really it was more like I was running and he was running after me. And I was starting to see those things line up, but I knew the surrender that it was going to take to really have that happen in my life. And that was scary because, like you were saying, like that pain to remain the same and that pain to change, and I had to get to the tipping point. And so I definitely like ran into a circumstance in my life that was like, okay, this is the tipping point. And I've heard that surrendering to God can do this thing, and I've tried everything else. And so for me, that meant leaving here, going into this awesome restorative care program that I had to go to that just changed my life. But leaving Ventura was like the scariest thing that I had ever done. And yet it was just an incredible gift to go and be able to kind of leave my mat for a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
So how long were you in the restorative care?
For a year.
For a year. So took the risk for a year to be in that program, and then ended up where? Like, so then it's like, are you coming back home? Or like God's going, all right, now do you want to get well?
Right.
Like, what do we got next?
Right. And so so I actually stayed. I went to a restorative care program in Chicago and ended up staying for another 2.5, almost 3 years. Just because like I knew that for me, coming back to Ventura wouldn't have been the healing that I needed. I needed just a completely different life. I needed time to live as this new person, this new creation with this new name that God had promised me, and have people see me for that first, right? And learn how to live as that person and learn how to live like, what of these things about myself are great things that God has created, and what are these things about myself do I need to refine and continue to work on and continue to heal without having people initially see me for my story and for my past and for the choices that I had made.
That's good.
Yeah.
So you're going to Moody.
Yeah.
So you're hanging out at a church plant that we love,
right,
in Chicago, that we're good friends with, that we all like planted together, which is cool. Kind of on staff, doing some outreach things with them, and then life honestly is great.
Right.
Like, and
life is amazing.
And then God's going, all right, I got some stuff in your life that I want to
Time to come back.
Time to come back.
Yeah.
So tell me, how's that walking back into your hometown?
Right.
Full on mat now. You got your mat with you, walking back, and how's that been coming back?
It was
home?
hard. Honestly, like I had a lot of grief that I had to go to for coming back. I had to like just go through that process because, like you said, I was on staff at this incredible church in Chicago that was passionate about all of the things I was passionate about, with people who really saw me for first who I was then, and second for what I had been through before. I was just like killing it in school, doing all of these things, and my daughter needed me to come home. And so I knew there was a word from God that I had to turn around. I had to drop a lot of these things or learn how to make them work from Ventura. But it was scary, like having my past precede me is a different kind of animal. And it has been interesting because when I was gone, it was like I got to show up as fully who I am now and choose when I got to show that mat, choose when I got to tell people my story and how and when. And now I show up as my story first and choose how am I going to show people Christ in me and what he's done in my life. And that's a harder path to walk. It really is, to like make those decisions and make those presentations of the gospel and of like the goodness of God in your action instead of just in people's assumption.
Yeah, that mat does not define you anymore.
Right.
Like that's part of the identity of like as a much loved daughter.
Yeah.
It's like there's no power in that thing anymore. So Tell me what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Tell us. I know.
It's been amazing, honestly. Like, to think, I looked at the life that God created for me in Chicago and was like, how could he want me to leave this thing? This is the best life that I could ever imagine. And in obedience of coming back and doing the last thing that God told me to do, I've watched him be like, yeah, that was just a taste of what I had for you. And just like stepping fully into that. So I'm working for this incredible organization called Safe House Project. I'm fighting with them to like work against the problem of domestic trafficking, sex trafficking. And that's like the cool thing with God, right? Is like he's the only one that can take our mess, like our misery, and turn it into our message. Mm-hmm. These things that we walk through that were like the darkest parts of who we are and what we experienced, and turn them into like bringing light to the world. And so that's really what I get to have my hands in, and I'm like, have this professional title and business cards and
you're so grown up.
and sit and talk to like, you know, just incredible organizations and talk to like investigators, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I kind of know what I'm doing, which is the weirdest part, right? Yeah. And I just get to work with them, and I get to pray with them, and I get to just see what God's doing in the lives of people when they come to their stress point, and being like, hey, I've been there, I've been through this restorative care, I know what this is like, I know the value of this, and so I get to walk alongside the survivors who are going through that, and I get to advocate to them, or for them, to people who may not know how to support it and things like that. It's just the coolest thing.
Yeah, so cool. So I'll probably take a risk here. So what would you say to people like that like when you were walking in, like at different stages of like taking a risk to get well, taking a risk to feel safe, taking a risk to make a change, right? You know, like what would you say like to anyone out with us online or wherever, like if that was them, what would you say?
It's never too messy. I think about like when I first came here, right? And I was a mess and everything was great. And I was just loved, and I could have stopped then, right? And life would have been easier if I had stopped making my life a mess at 22. But I stopped at 26, and it still wasn't late. Wasn't too late. I could have stopped at 32 and it wouldn't have been too late. Right. There's never a point when God's like, okay, I'm done chasing after you. I'm done. I've tried too many times. I've put too many signs in people in your life. I'm done. I'm walking away. Like that point is whenever we decide that we're done and we're ready to chase after him, and that this is a safe place. Like this is a place where you can come. I was like 87 pounds and doing drugs in the parking lot when I first came here. Like it was, and love was experienced here, and it's just the overflow of what we find in Christ.
Mm-hmm. Man, will you help me thank all you? So I'm so proud of you. I love you.
Sorry.
You're good. I'm telling you, God transforms lives and rewrites stories. Yeah. And I'm not just saying it because it sounds good to preach or read from the Bible. I'm saying it because I've watched it happen. Like real life miracles. Like all of us that have been rescued by Jesus are real life walking miracles, not because we got our stuff cleaned up, but because we were dead and God made us alive. And I want that for you. And we don't do this all the time, but I'm going to take a risk today. So just bear with me. If you're annoyed, you'll be fine. We've got pastoral care team right here. I'm going to invite them up down here. And if you want to get well, God can make you well. If there's a spiritual step that you need to take to kind of go like, man, I don't know if I believe all that God stuff, but my heart is starting to bend that way. And I think if it's possible that God is who he says he is, and he sent Jesus and he could make me well, I think I want to take a step in that direction. Today could be your day. So here in a second, I'm going to pray, and you can make your way down here. They're going to sing a song. You can make your way down here. If you're online, there's the people in the host chat would love to talk to you right now. If you're on the patio or in the lobby, connection point is right there. The same kind of people, pastoral care, are ready to talk to you at any point in the next few moments. But if there's something going on relationally, emotionally, spiritually, in your family, maybe in some addictive behavior, I just want to ask from Jesus, not from me, do you want to get well? Not how did you get here? Not whose fault is it? Not do you have a plan to make yourself better? None of that. Do you want to get well? Because Jesus is going, I can help you get well if you want to, but I can't help you want to. Let me pray. God, you are good and you are great and you rewrite stories and you rescue lives. You bring us back to you. You establish us as much loved sons and daughters. You don't hold our past against us. You have plans for us for a hope and a future, to prosper, not to harm us. God, would you just convince somebody like only you can in these next few moments that you are the way, you are the truth, and you are the life, and that you can rescue and save. Man, you're good. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.